If you're going for a drive and you want to get to your destination faster, you know what to do. Bring a companion. A passenger means you can take advantage of one of these babies. Carpool lanes, or high-occupancy vehicle lanes. Your companion gets a ride, there's one less car on the road, and you get to your destination faster. It's a win-win-win. Or at least, it is in theory. Debates over the actual efficacy of HOV lanes have raged for decades. There's a lot of complicated reasons why, which we'll get to. But one prominent researcher summed them up with this paradox. The more effective an HOV lane is, the less effective it is. HOV lanes were introduced in the 1970s, but carpooling as a concept...
Pooling was really kind of traces its origins to kind of World War II.
It's literally always World War II. Every time we go into the history, it's always like, and it all changed after World War II.
So take your neighbor to work and take him home again.
Americans piled into each other's cars to conserve gas for the war effort. A few wars and decades later, they did so once again.
In the 1970s, there were a series of political and economic events that led to basically limited gasoline availability and high gasoline prices. And so sharing a ride was a way of basically making it easier to get around, less expensive to get around, and also had some environmental benefits at a time when there was increasing environmental awareness about the impacts of driving.
So the Federal Highway Administration permitted the use of federal funds to build HOV lanes beginning in the early 1970s. The earliest HOV lanes weren't for cars. They were for the highest occupancy vehicles, buses, and sometimes vans. Initially, the plan worked. The FHWA found a 23% drop in vehicle miles traveled during the energy crisis. But this being the United States, regular cars soon took over anyway. Spacious garages and workplace parking lots encouraged a car-centric lifestyle. Buses and vans were underutilized, so cities and states gradually lowered the required occupancy for a carpool from bus quantities to private cars with 4 people, to 3, to just 2. In Houston, this process only took 2 years. Despite this availability of HOV lanes, the only category of transit that increased from 1980 to 1990 was the solo driver. All other forms of carpooling declined, sometimes precipitously. All of this meant more congestion and lots of smog. So how did cities and states try to solve this problem? Why, with more HOV lanes. The 1990 Clean Air Act declared HOV lanes a method states could use to achieve federal air quality standards. Then, the 1991 Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act adjusted use of federal highway funds to favor HOV lanes. Public policy experts soon began asking a simple question. Are these lanes actually working? 3 critiques became commonplace. Number 1,
do they really encourage increased occupancy? Or do they serve, for example, families who had already been, sharing a ride?
See, this is one of our producers, Steve, and this is his girlfriend, Bree. They would have carpooled regardless of the HOV lane. This is a natural carpool, which doesn't reduce the number of cars on the road. Think Steve and Bree, parents and kids, or close friends. The goal is induced carpools, where 2 or more people who normally wouldn't ride together are compelled to do so by the HOV lane. It's hard to track how many carpools are induced versus natural, but we do know that the proportion of American commuters who carpool fell from 14.1% in 1985 to 8.7% in 2003. Critique number 2, induced demand. This is a phenomenon by which more lanes eventually create more congestion by enticing more people to drive. For HOV lanes, the enticement is those sweet, sweet potential time savings. And finally, critique number 3, or the paradox from the beginning of this video. There's a whole lot of fiddly math that explains this in depth. You can find those sources in the description box if that's how you want to spend an afternoon. If you don't, here's the gist. For an HOV lane to reduce the number of cars on the road, it has to offer enough time savings to induce people to carpool. But sufficient time savings can only exist if the general purpose lanes remain congested. Some researchers have outlined very specific situations in which HOV lanes can induce carpooling without inducing too much demand. But overall, HOV lanes have historically presented risks of greater congestion. In 1976, some drivers in Los Angeles got so mad at a new HOV lane that they scattered nails in it as a protest. The lane reverted back to general purpose within 5 months. Today, there are over 3,000 miles of HOV lanes in the United States, and expert opinions are mixed on what to do with them.
One school of thought is that people may not like HOV lanes because they encourage people to drive and that you'd rather have people take transit instead of driving at all. I think the other school of thought is that in the US, we have a lot of auto-oriented, regions, and that if you can get people to share a ride versus driving alone, that's better.
Some are optimistic that HOV lanes can be effective with the right circumstances.
We know that HOV lanes should be paired with other supportive infrastructure. So park and ride facilities is another common piece of infrastructure that developed around the same time as HOV lanes. And the purpose of park and ride facilities was really to allow people from different residential locations to meet at a common point and share a ride to their workplace.
Other options include opening HOV lanes to those willing to pay a toll or who drive low-emissions vehicles. Big picture, the United States car-centric lifestyle doesn't appear to be going anywhere anytime soon, so we'll still need to grapple with issues of congestion and emissions going forward, with or without high-occupancy vehicle lanes. What do you think? Do you wish you could trade in your car for easily accessible public transit? Or do you relish solo drives? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss future videos.